I will be happy to. I will be happy to do that, Kate. Again, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the October edition of the monthly leadership call. With that, we will now call the meeting to order. And the first order of business are public comments. Any public comments out there, Michael?
We'll see here in a second. Anyone that's joined the call from the public, if you'd like to make a comment, please use the raise hand function in Zoom, and I'll ask you to unmute yourself. So we'll give it a few seconds here. Does not look like there's any comment today.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we have one. Here we go. Mr. Johnson, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I was pausing because Al Bredenberg had told me he might try to link in. He's working on Civil War, Union, and city fortifications. He told me he had a nice tour with Kate and some of the other staff members and had some updating information. But anyway, my comment today is to note what I'm sure all of you have considered, the fact that the park is divided by a railroad. And in a sense, that's an advantage because it does focus on two different kinds of park, which together can be greater than the sum of the parts. There's what I sort of describing until somebody can give me a better term, the cultural part of the park, which is the old buildings and some of that legacy. Of course, an important part of the cultural part of the park is in what I call for want of a better word, pastoral picturesque park. And that's, of course, the cemetery and plantation house and the Flowers Cottage. But largely, those purposes are really more sympathetic with picturesque pastoral kind of natural open space as contrast with the rest, which gives the opportunity for hundreds of related and complementary activities in the buildings on that larger half nearest Lake Wheeler Road. I'm also important because, I wouldn't be talking if it didn't have to do with parking for at least a second. It gives an opportunity to put parking there and leave the other part free of vehicle circulation and parking as well. And that, of course, was a big idea of Frank Lloyd, not Frank Lloyd Wright, of course, Olmsted at Central Park to keep cars out of view, at least. Certainly no storage of cars, either temporary or long-term. And David Smith can tell you the success of the State Fair. Commonly have 100,000 people come there on a busy day at the fair. And I've noticed that parking was as far away as PNC. In fact, half or more, well over half of that lot was full of cars, people walking to the fair. It may be interesting to note the distance from the PNC building to the Dorton Arena is, as the crow flies, is exactly a mile. So people, when they want to come to see something big, they tend to find a way to find a place to park and get there. I think it's worth keeping in mind. In addition to the fact that there are the two parts of the park, as I've described, there's really a third part, and that's the area around the edge. And it's interesting to note that, as I pointed out earlier, the possibilities of some level of coalescence with the other big development project in the area, which of course is Centennial Campus. And the university is opening a survey for people to comment on apparently the whole thing, not just the Centennial Campus part. And I think there can be no more important thing that this group does, with the possible exception of finding a convenient parking place for everybody who wants to come there. I'm only being facetious. Than to establish that connection firmly and vigorously. And I'm so excited the university is reaching out to make Dix Park a part of that. For the 3 years that it's been since I had the opportunity to post an op-ed piece in the News and Observer about the potential for making some sort of ensemble between the two focused around Spring Hill. There's been attention to it and interest in it. And I'm very excited about the job that everyone on this committee and the community committee is doing with that respect, in that respect. I know it gets tedious to hear me go on about all this stuff, but I am grateful that I'm able to be part of the conversation. And I think we're constantly at points where this thing gets more exciting than the day before. And I know that it will continue to be that kind of thing, probably for the rest of my life and for a generation to come, because there's so many opportunities there. Thanks. That's my little pedantic posture for the day. And now you can get to the real work.
Doug, as always, thank you for your insight and thoughts. We appreciate it. I believe the mayor has joined us, but there is another speaker. Michael, is that correct?
Yeah, Mr. Bredenberg, who's connected, would like to make a comment, but he's having difficulty hearing us. So Nick is working with him to see if he can get his audio figured out. Right now, it's not ready to go. So I don't know if we want to move on and maybe come back, or if we want to wait a couple minutes to see. I'll let you guys decide that.
Why don't we keep going, and we can come back when he's available.
Sounds good.
Kate, turn it back to you.
Yeah, so next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. So either Orridge or Mayor, I don't know if you're able to jump in, if y'all want to lead us through the approval of the minutes from September.
Why don't I just go ahead? I hope you've all had a chance to see the minutes. Any corrections? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Nancy.
Is there a second?
Second, Jennifer.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, just raise your hand. Say aye. Ayes carried.
Aye.
Next item.
Great. The next is the community committee report. Nick, I know you're also trying to help Al, but are you able to jump in and give the community committee report? All right, we will come back to that. Nick's trying to help Al out. So Joey, would you mind and go ahead and give the program and event update, and I'll share my screen.
Be happy to. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great Tuesday. So just wanted to provide some updates on some of the program and event offerings that are going to be coming up at the park in the next couple of weeks and months. So this week actually is a very exciting week at the park, as we have two very special programs and events occurring. This Thursday evening, we're excited to be working with and led by the Legacy Committee. They've been working on a Legacy Committee programming series, and the first of those programs is occurring this Thursday evening, October 28th, in the chapel at 7 p.m. called In Plain Sight. So the Legacy Committee has been working on this program that really focuses on and talks about and will teach attendees about recent discoveries, preservations, and reparations of a 650-year-old canoe that the Coatry tribal community and how the artifacts like the canoe have helped North Carolina American Indians reclaim their past. So I can say I've had the opportunity to work with folks from the Legacy Committee on putting this program together. They're very excited. They've put together a great program, and I hope you'll all be able to attend this Thursday, the 28th, here in the chapel for the In Plain Sight program. Also this Saturday, we're so excited about the first InterTribal Powwow to happen here at Dix Park. Trey Roberts from the Dix Park Conservancy has been working really hard to lead this event and bringing and celebrating the legacy and the culture of the North Carolina indigenous communities. The event will be this Saturday starting at 10 a.m. here at the park on the big field. As you can see on the right side, there's an example of the flyer that's been put together for the event that will feature different dances and different celebrations and different entertainment throughout the event. There are dancers from all over the state of North Carolina. You can see information there about the different prizes that'll be a part of the competition. As we all know, at Dix Park, everything is free and open to the public. There'll be food trucks. There'll also be over 20 different vendors that'll be at the event. So we hope that you all will join us on Saturday as well to celebrate the powwow and celebrate this event at the park. And like I said, Trey has worked really hard with the planning committee to pull this event together, bring this event together. We're so excited that the park's going to have the opportunity to host it. And then in late November into December, Nights of Lights is returning to Dix Park in 2021. As you all are aware, this will be the second year of the Nights of Lights event. The theme this year for Nights of Lights is more lights, more nights, and less cars. As we all know, last year we learned about car volume and counts for the park. So one of the things we've really focused on this year with the Nights of Lights event is really taking what we learned from 2020 and adjusting the number of vehicle tickets that are available every night. So you can see some of the key dates around Nights of Lights. Tickets went on sale back on September 30th. Something new we've added to Nights of Lights this year we're excited about is there's going to be an opportunity for a 5K run and walk through the lights on Saturday, November 20th. I heard from our organizer on that. We already have over 400 runners and walkers registered for the race, which this far out is incredible. So we're excited about a great turnout that night. Also, from the response from the biking community here in Raleigh, we've added 2 full bike nights for the event this year, one on Saturday, November 21st, and the other on Monday, December 13th. So those will be 2 nights completely dedicated to bikes. And I had the opportunity to meet with the BPAC group a couple of weeks ago. They're so excited about the opportunity to have those nights dedicated to bikes. And then vehicles will start the Friday after Thanksgiving and continue through December 24th. Some other points about Nights of Lights: new light features will be included this year from local artists. And we're also excited about Christmas Tree Lane, which is going to be a section in the event where we're inviting local groups and nonprofits to decorate a tree at the event. And there'll be signage kind of saying this tree was decorated by this group and this tree was decorated by this group. So it's a really great way to involve local groups and nonprofits in the event. They can kind of come out and be a part of the event as you're driving through. And then also, like we did in 2020, we're excited that we're going to be continuing with the community outreach and engagement effort again this year. Nights of Lights will be providing over 1,000 free vehicle tickets to 25 local groups and nonprofits in the community, which we also did last year, which groups were very appreciative of. And these tickets are really kind of meant for these organizations to appreciate and thank volunteers and essential folks in their groups and nonprofits to be able to come and enjoy the event. So Nights of Lights is off and running. If you've been through the park this week, the installation of Nights of Lights is beginning here in the park. So you'll start to see more and more lights and displays go up. It's very exciting as Nights of Lights is only a few weeks away. So I'll be happy to answer any questions around In Plain Sight or the powwow or Nights of Lights. No way, I did that good. Kate, back to you.
No, hey, I do have.
Too soon, Orge. I apologize. Too soon.
Joy, couldn't let me go. So, will the canoe be on display when that was discovered? You know, is it there for us to see?
It will not be on display, but they'll be kind of talking about it. There'll be images around it, things of that nature. So they'll be talking about the significance of it during the program. Okay, thank you. You're very welcome.
Can I ask a question? Joey, I love the new theme. I just wanted to mention that Marjorie Hodges was mentioning that Cheekwood in Nashville has an amazing light show that might just be, you know, another benchmark or community to visit to just see how these things can evolve. And just wanted to throw that out there if anyone wanted to think about a Nashville trip at some point.
A Nashville trip sounds wonderful. So yeah, one of the things we've been doing is kind of connecting with some of those light shows in the region, kind of learning from them and talking with them. The focus this year is really just making sure we have a really solid plan around car counts and vehicle counts and those pieces. And then I think there'll be opportunities through the new agreement that the city entered into with WRAL and Capital Broadcasting over the next 5 years to think about what are maybe some additional things or different ways we want to think about the event once we feel really good about the kind of vehicle count plan. So I think that's where we'll continue to learn from some of those other light show organizers about what's successful for them as well. So thank you. I'll add that one to my list as well. That's a new one that I had heard about. Any other questions? Now, Kate, back to you.
Thanks, Joey. We'll jump back in the agenda. Nick, you are ready to give the community committee report? Great.
Yep. Kate, I don't see Shauna on the meeting, do you?
No, she texted this morning that she wasn't able to make it.
Okay. Well, I'm having a little trouble hearing you also, by the way. Good morning, committee. Nick Smith. I'm going to step in for Shauna and give the community committee report this morning. We had our fall quarterly meeting this past week, and we focused on 3 primary objectives. We received the Art in the Play Plaza presentation from the Raleigh Arts. We received an overview of the legacy committee work from the chair and Franklin, and also upcoming information about the In Plain Sight event that was just referenced. And then the main bulk of the committee work was around wrapping up our task forces for the year. We established 3 task forces at the beginning of this past calendar year: park equity, park partnerships, and early park improvements. And we formally closed those task forces at this previous meeting. So I'd like to share kind of our final reporting out of that with the leadership committee. And finally, as I get into that, our committee terms, we split our committee when we were established into thirds. So we have a third of our committee that will be ending their term at the end of the year. So our committee leadership, Jay and Shauna and Eric, will be reaching out to those members, determining if they'd like to serve a second term. Folks are able to serve 2 consecutive terms. So those are conversations that will be happening. But to our task force reports, for our equity task force, we spent the bulk of the year working through reviewing the equity work that had been completed to date. We worked through as a task force defining and confirming what we call our equity dimensions. These are the areas of equity in the park development and planning, areas of park development and planning where equity can be embedded. So we define those, and then we worked through what the actual definition of equity in the park, in the Dix Park context specifically, could be before developing a list of potential equity plan partners. So for the committee today and across all 3 of our task forces, we're presenting these as information. There may be action, Kate, for these at a subsequent meeting, but today it's just for information purposes. And on the next slide is the definition that was crafted. This was built off of the City of Raleigh's definition of equity. We wanted to make sure that any equity initiatives that are happening in our park context and the Parks Department context is aligned with the city efforts. We used the city's definition, and we added some terms more specific to park planning. And our definition that we put forward and are recommending to this leadership committee is justice, fair treatment, and opportunity for the advancement of all people across all dimensions of park operations and development, including affordability, economic opportunity, engagement, accessibility, partnerships, programming, health, and legacy. And we also developed, along with this definition, a narrative sheet that talks through our process as a task force to get this. So we plan to share this with Kate to be shared with the full leadership committee on the reasonings behind and how this can fold into the larger city efforts around equity. But we're really happy with this definition, and the committee as a whole supports moving this forward. Our second task force was early park improvements, and they worked through building off the first phase of early park improvements. These are the amenities that have been added that we're all aware of at the park. We did a tour with this group walking through these as well. Building off of this, obviously there are more improvement needs and amenity needs at the park. So this task force worked through a needs list that was then developed further with criteria for prioritizing these needs. We had a joint meeting with our equity task force to ensure that equity lens was put towards all of kind of our decision-making matrix in this work. And finally, the end product was a phase 2 priority list for early park improvements. The city team is working through building this phase 2 list. So these are the recommended items. The task force determined that there should be 2 categories, that these are funded differently. The first being infrastructure and the second being amenities. And infrastructure, I won't read this full list. These are the needs for the basic kind of structure of the experience in the park and what's making that possible through accessibility, through signage, through kind of basic infrastructure around some of our amenities, some of the actual amenities themselves. And then separate is kind of our recreation amenities. These are the things that folks go to the park to enjoy. So it made sense for the task force to separate these out, and we like to bring these forward to this leadership committee for inclusion in this next round of early park improvements. And then, Kate, is there a third task force in there? Did we?
I can speak to that real quickly. The third task force really was around the park partnerships. And that task force talked a lot about the upcoming DFI and building an infrastructure study and how future partners for buildings, for programs, for events, and what the criteria should be to review. For example, the 15 letters of interest that we received from people that have expressed interest. So it's a group, that group will continue to support the building and infrastructure study as it moves forward and be a sounding board for staff through that. So they're kind of a more ongoing group that will provide support as the building and infrastructure work unfolds. Any questions around some of the recent community committee work?
It all sounds good. Sounds really good.
Joey, you said you had one more update, and then we will proceed with the agenda.
Yeah, I just wanted to also mention next Wednesday evening here in the chapel on November 3rd from 4:30 to 6:30, the Triangle J Council of Governments group will be meeting here for a reception. They'll be inviting city managers from all over the region to kind of gather here at the chapel for a reception. Folks from the Council of Governments was sharing with me, this will be the first time that they've invited folks to gather back in person over a year and a half. And they wanted to do so here in Dix Park and kind of showcase the chapel. So that group will be here in the chapel next Wednesday evening, 4:30 to 6:30, doing a reception here in the chapel. And just wanted to mention that it was a very exciting kind of event when they reached out for a great group to kind of gather here in the space. So that's next Wednesday.
Great, thank you. The only other piece I want to add to program and events before we jump back into the agenda is that the Dix Park team has been working with the Greater Raleigh Visitor and Convention Bureau on data tracking and visitorship tracking through a program called Arrivalist, which basically tracks cell phone data within geofenced areas. And in partnership with GRCVB, we looked at basically the attendance during peak bloom of sunflowers. And so I just want to share a couple of results from that data gathering. So GRCVB from July 12th through August 1st, which was pretty much our peak bloom, we had around 70,000 attendees or cell phones. So I know not everyone carries a cell phone, but 70,000 phones were tracked within that geofenced area of the sunflowers. Really interesting that 77% of those were local, so within 50 miles of the sunflower field, and 23% of those were visitors, 40% being day trippers, 60% being overnight visitors. And one of the fascinating things about this software is that it actually tracks where people go after they visit the sunflowers. And so here you can see people went back to the airport, went to the state fairgrounds, the Museum of Natural Sciences, and went shopping. So this is just really interesting data to collect. And we will be doing more of this with GRCVB as kind of they are figuring out their data collection program. With anything that GRCVB does, they do put an economic multiplier to things. So from their report, which we will send out after this meeting, so you have all of the data, they estimated about a $1.4 million direct economic impact from this visitorship. And so interesting data. We will continue to work with them to refine it and figure out how to collect data in such a big area as the park is. But I think it's a good step in the direction of collecting both visitorship and economic data for the park.
Kate, I love data, of course. The 1.4 million direct impacts, so is that, just if I can add any color here, it would be the 25% of the visitors who were from out of town and then what they spent.
That's right. So they do not, it is not the local audience that they track economic data. It is the visiting audience that because it's not, it's new money to the economy. And so that is the visitor money to the local economy. And the report that you'll get after this will provide all of that in detail, but that's right, Janet, it is the visitor impact. Any questions about arrival list or what we're doing with GRCVB to collect better visitation information? All right. Mayor, I will hand it back over to you. The next item on the agenda is really a discussion of the agreements that we have with the Dix Park Conservancy, and Stephen and I are ready to discuss those, but just wanted to say hello and make sure you can hear us again and we're all good.
Yeah, I apologize. I had some major computer issues. Still haven't figured out what happened, but technology, what can I say? So good to see everybody this morning. I wish we were in person at the park, but we'll get there. So next is I asked for this item to be put on the agenda, just so we're all aware of what the agreements look like and there is consensus. So if y'all could present, be happy, we're all ears.
I will share my screen and then, all right. So Stephen, we're happy to tag team, but you want to lead us off, or I'll lead us off here and then you can pick up on the agreements that are in progress?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. This is just a little bit of background to understand where we've been so that you can have kind of a context for where we are today on agreements with the Dix Park Conservancy. So the first memorandum of understanding was signed in 2016, and it really just aligned mutual aspirations for the park. It created the leadership committee and community committee, which has evolved an advisory committee, which has evolved, and it outlined the process to select the master plan consultant. In 2020, we actually revised that agreement and signed a memorandum of agreement with the Conservancy, which affirmed the long-term shared vision for the park. It's a 15-year agreement. It restructured the leadership it restructured the executive and advisory committee into this group and the community committee. And it outlined a donor recognition and naming process, which we are currently working to finalize with the Conservancy. The two funding agreements that have been established, there was one in 2017 that basically paid for the development of the master plan and paid for programmatic and operational support, including Destination Dix, which was our first large event. The second funding agreement was signed in July of 2020. That funded the design of the Plaza Play, and it funded the additional programs, events, and planning support. And all of that money has come obviously from the Dix Park Conservancy. So those have been the past two funding agreements. And we are currently working on the third. So Stephen, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, good morning, Mayor and members of the Leadership Committee. It's good to see everybody. Thank you, Kate. The good thing is we have a solid track record of creating agreements with the Conservancy and their board members and in good faith. And for the next funding agreement, as Kate pointed out, we've created two. So we have a good basis. We're not starting from scratch, which is always, that usually takes the most amount of time. The next focus will be on the Play Plaza. Things that we would be looking at is the amount of the commitment from the Conservancy, over what period of time. The last couple have been around a 4 to 5 year time frame. We've worked with the Conservancy very well on them developing a payment schedule, because what we've working through our relationship, it's better to have the Conservancy hold on the money, because if they have investments that can yield money instead of giving like a large lump sum. Specific uses, and that might be tied to associated naming agreements, which eventually will be the next slide. But obviously for this one, it is just the first phase of the park. I know that Janet and the board are working on potential naming opportunities. And then we have fairly standard boilerplate stuff like our non-discrimination clauses for the city, our insurance requirements. And other things we look at and working through is there a continuation of any future programs and events associated. So next third funding agreement, just to summarize, we'll focus on Plaza Play, and we'll work on those 4 or 5 bullets of time, amount, payment schedule with the Conservancy team and their board members. But the beauty is we have a couple of templates that we could use to jumpstart from. I'll go to the next. A gift agreement. We actually have been working with Janet and some board members and the Conservancy's attorneys on hopefully something that can be replicated in the future when future donor opportunities come up. They're consistent with what the council's already passed with the naming policy and guidelines. And essentially it's recognizing a large charitable gift to the Conservancy, which will end up being a gift to the city. And there's all sorts of different options we're looking at, multi-party agreements, but overall it's the same: how much, how long, and the specific name to be used. So that actually, we have drafts going back and forth, working with Janet. And those are really the 2 slides that we've prepared. I think we're going to pause there. Kate, is that, yeah.
So I have a specific question related to that, and I've been asked this by members of our council. Is there a dollar amount that triggers a naming rights opportunity versus a sponsorship?
Yep. So I'll welcome Kate and Janet to jump in, but what we have talked about with Janet is the larger dollar amounts would be a naming right. So sponsorships will pull aside. That's usually a specific period of time that has a sunset, usually maybe corporate in nature. But for a naming right, it might be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years at a larger gift, and we'd have fewer of those, like naming an asset or an area after a person, versus where donor recognition is where you might see a series of donors across a wall or embedded into the design to recognize multiple donors. Janet, since this is a little bit more your wheelhouse on size and scale, do you want to share some of your thoughts?
Yeah, so Mayor, definitely it's usually naming rights would be a higher dollar most typically, but it's also just 2 types. So, and I guess my example would be if we said, you know, the Watermill Mountain Playground, if it was a naming right, you would say the Smith family Watermill Mountain Playground. Donor recognition will be Watermill Mountain Playground brought to you by the Smith family. So it truly is the naming of that entity versus the donor being recognized as supporting it. So it's, a different category, but yes, it does tend to be a higher dollar.
Can we define higher dollar?
Right now, the naming is 10 million, and the land bridge, which was the other opportunity in the early projects, is also 10 million for naming.
All right, that's what I was trying to get to. And is there consensus among the leadership committee on this? I don't want to have something come back and bite us later. I just want to make sure everybody is on board.
Can I ask a question, Mayor?
Yeah.
So Stephen, was this with the new naming and donor recognition that recently was just passed by City Council, there wasn't any dollar amount in that triggered naming, right? So this is very specific to Dix. Is that correct? I just want to clarify.
Yeah, if this group makes a motion for the mayor, it would be specifically towards Dorothea Dix. That is correct. Mm-hmm. And remember, naming in the city is associated either with in-kind or money or honorary. And we're specifically talking about someone giving money or a major in-kind donation.
Right. And so then what I'm hearing is that Janet is recommending from the Conservancy that be $10 million for the naming. Okay.
Yes, for those two specific, the land bridge and Plaza and Play.
Mm-hmm. And would it be for the entire playground or for portions like you were giving as your example?
It's officially the Play Plaza. So it's, the main plaza.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks.
Mayor, this is Jim. On the, I think there's an additional question, which is how many things will we name? Will we name the Grove? Will we name the Big Field? Will we name all the different things? Are we going to name everything? Right, well, just a little piece, but so looking forward to is something I think that we all ought to agree on.
Right now, we have not defined future phases. We've just worked with Janet on the Play Plaza, and specifically what she's described as kind of the Play Plaza itself, not like the cooking area or the house. It was more a portion of the 18 acres. Janet, is that accurate?
Yeah, well, and to get to Jim's point, he has requested, and we need to schedule a meeting so that we can talk about future phases.
Okay.
And make sure that we take the same, I'm going to say conservative with a small c approach, right? That we're not naming everything willy-nilly, and that we are thoughtful on how we balance, the integrity of the park versus, fundraising.
Right. Yes, we're definitely welcome.
I think some of it, is Nancy, is contextual, as in right now we're looking at a $10 million naming right for the project, this, big project that we're working on. We know we're going to be raising money in perpetuity. And some of it may be, is there a next big project, or are we able to raise more money and don't need one major donor? I mean, I know this sort of sets a precedent where, people may think, well, if I can give $10 million, I can have something else named after me. But I think it's going to be an ongoing, evolving strategy per se, because I think our financial situation is going to be changing over the years.
Where this originated is when we looked at the first phase of work that MVVA proposed in the master plan. The two things that kind of came up as potentially bigger ticket items that might warrant a name were the land bridge and the Play Plaza, or the plaza area of what was then called the Gateway and has evolved a couple of times in naming. When we start to look at the build out of the park, I think it's really, to both Jim and Janet's point, really important to look at the phasing of those projects. And then within that phasing, are there opportunities for additional donor recognition and or naming, and being very mindful of what the impact is to the park and the public experience and all of those things. So we haven't stepped beyond that first group of projects, but I think that is a prudent next step, so that as the Conservancy is raising money, we've got an understanding about what some of those opportunities may be in the future.
Yeah, Kate, that's a great point. And we also heard from other park designers, including MBVA and park administrators, some of it comes opportunistic. That lead gift could propose like another phase that was unexpected. So kind of what Jim is asking, foreshadowing a little bit where we're going intentionally can maybe lead to opportunities that we weren't aware of.
And I just want to mention one thing real quick. I know I've talked to Jim about this, just sort of you don't really want the feeling of you're walking through the Stephen Bentley, this or the Kate Pierce, you don't want it to be sort of over commercialized, but, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but they just opened a big children's museum in City Park in New Orleans. And there's a lake, and around the lake are these railings that have these glass, almost giant beads on them that can spin, and they're different colors, but each of them has donors' names etched into them. So they're very much a part of the work of art. You see the names, but it's not, you know what I mean? It's not the big giant black and white sign. So I think there's really creative ways as we move forward to figure out how to work that in.
Really, I think what we're talking about is balance. Plain and simple. Just making sure that we don't overrun with naming rights opportunities. At the same time, what Nancy just said, looking at ways we can be really creative to incorporate recognition. So let me ask this, do we need a motion? Oh, Carlton, do you have your hand raised?
I do, and thank you. I was at MoMA yesterday in New York, Museum of Modern Art, and was kind of focused on this. It's the Abbey Aldrich Rockefeller Garden. It's this gallery, it's that gallery. Every single gallery was named for a donor. Now, it wasn't in big neon signs, but when you walked in to a room, there was a donor's name. There was a planting area out in the beautiful garden where individual trees were sponsored by someone in memorial of someone else, little small plaques. And I've taken some pictures, and I'm going to send you those. I think it is a question of balance. And I know the city, this is new to the city, but all of us have been to wonderful public spaces. And this is really rather ordinary. You have to be sure that it doesn't look like that it's, all paid for by one particular group, and you don't want any Sackler galleries anymore. But every single aspect of MoMA, which raises hundreds of millions, has discrete but visible signage and recognition. So it'd be great if we had, the Tulsa situation where we had one great benefactor that just simply wrote a check. But I think going forward, it is true that we will raise less money with less recognition. We will raise more money with more recognition. And so the issue is balance and what the city is comfortable with.
Okay, thank you, Carlton. Be interesting.
Mayor, I'll just point out that to me, Mayor, it's I don't think you have to do recognition. We've done $37 million, and nobody, all we said was, you'll get recognition. To me, it's a matter of what we have to do to raise the money. I don't think we have to do it. So I'm going to continue to fuss about it, but I think we've got a good plan now. And the question is, what's the future plan? You know, nobody that's given money to the park up until now even asked for donor naming or anything. It was, everybody will get the same recognition. So I really do think the trend is away from naming everything, and we'll keep sort of, I don't disagree with Carlton. I think we can raise more money with more naming opportunities, but I would say I think we can raise all the money we need without them. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Well, I hope that staff has gotten the guidance that they need. I think the next step would be identifying potential opportunities in the future, just so we're all comfortable with the balance that we're striking. So if we could get to that next step, I think that would be helpful.
Yep. And Mayor, I'm going to schedule something on the Conservancy side, and we'll work with the city. I appreciate Tansy, Stephen, and others who's been very engaged with this discussion. So,
okay, thank you. Kate, next we have the around the table discussion. I think that Kate has a few things that she would like to share. So Kate, I'm going to start with you.
Sure, yeah, and Janet actually has to jump off at 10. So she, I'll hand it over to her and then we can come back to the group.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen real quick, just a second. Okay, can everybody see the?
Yes.
All right, so I just put this together, and Mayor and members of the committee, thanks for the time. As you know, we are going into a city council work session on the Parks Bond, and we've been in, of course, close touch with the mayor, but also trying to meet with the various city councilors. So I just wanted to put together, you know, some data as a back pocket for those conversations. And let me just see if I can. What I did is just put like 12 things that I think have to sort of happen for this park and this public-private partnership to go forward constructively. And I think this is a good recap and building off of what Stephen and Kate just presented. The first, as you'll see, is the approval of this naming rights and donor recognition agreements. We do have one that is in the works and may be coming before you. So to the point we are in active conversation about one in specific, that probably in the short term. The finance agreement that we spoke to earlier, and appreciated that recap, that we will be working on finance agreement number 3 that will hopefully go through, say, 2025, where the Conservancy is committing to $20 million towards Play Plaza. In addition to we do have annual agreements where we make gifts towards programming, et cetera. Then I put the capital construction items. I put here groundbreaking in that this whole public-private, where you're asking for private dollars, our donors have all wanted to know that there is a commitment to the project, and this isn't just sometime in the indefinite future, that there is actually, right, a project happening. So a date certain of summer of 2022 for groundbreaking, and we all know Jim has that in his calendar. Then I also put that another commitment that donors have asked for is not just some sort of fixed date, but also a significant portion of early project costs that the city is committing to, because if they're going to write a $10 million check or a $5 million check, they want to know that they're not out there on their own. So I just put that, and I think we are open to, bond financing, alternative financing, but it just some significant threshold amount. completion of Lake Wheeler Road. This is so fundamental to the whole project that it is essential to figure out how to complete that before the ribbon cutting. And again, I'm thinking about all the folks who have donated to this project and sort of how they will feel, right, as this opens up, and be they founding partners or, you know, others, the pride they have taken in contributing to this park and making sure this is a successful opening. Also added early release of Lake Wheeler Road buildings from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. As you know, they are renting this campus through 2025, but there are a few key buildings that are jutting into the right-of-way on Lake Wheeler that are contingent to Play Plaza and the picnic area that we feel are just critical for the success of the, you know, food vending, bathrooms, and others, that getting access to those buildings early so that we can incorporate them into this project would be a critical path, and we want to work with you on that. I then put in staff resources. We've spent most of our time, I know in my first 9 months in this job, on capital, but I wanted to bring into the conversation the idea of staff and operating budgets as we develop into a park that is hosting national and regionally significant programming. You know, Joey, I appreciated the powwow reference that this is the first time we've had it at Dix Park, but I would even say this is significant for the entire East Coast to have 8 tribes coming together with thousands of people convening. You know, most of the time you think of those things as being a West Coast event. So, you know, to support that level of programming, having the right number of program staff, the right number of design staff for the amount of capital construction and the ambitiousness of the projects like the Creek and Play Plaza, facilities management and development staff. One thing, you know, we have so many buildings at the site, the chapel, the stone houses, there's so much to think about and plan, and we have no dedicated staff for any of that. And, you know, Kate is a wunderkind, but, you know, just the amount of work that Joey and Kate and others are doing, trying to support all of these roles without dedicated staffing. And then finally, this idea of a parks manager, as we develop this park, bringing on, right, the sort of sophisticated type person. I know in Tulsa that, right, the person they hired had run SeaWorld. Thinking about that, and I think the Conservancy is willing to discuss with the city as you add these positions, you know, do we top off a salary similar to what's happened at the North Carolina Museum of Art, where, you know, perhaps we pay a salary supplement if it goes outside of the range of what a city salary structure would accommodate. And again, I understand that from my past days, you know, in the treasurer's office. Operating budgets, just trying to get an estimate of, once this Play Plaza opens, you know, what are the operating costs going to be? And I know that the city is investing significant dollars across their system, right? I did go to Chavis. I know just beautiful park, beautiful facilities, and those will need maintenance and upkeep for that Fountain Plaza, this coming aquatics facility. So I know that you are all thinking about how is your operating budget at the city going to have to change as you develop these amazing facilities that do need a lot of operating support. And then finally, when those DHHS campus buildings come, what is the plan for operating? And I believe I was talking to Stephen this morning that the idea is, can we ask for a, you know, sort of a, in that financing agreement, some sense of not only how we get that capital paid for, but the operating. And I know Jen Wagner's on the call. I think this, you know, Dix Park can help with the conversation that we're all having across the park system on these issues, because they're not unique to Dix. We're probably just a little more acute and intense, but these are challenges and opportunities across the whole system. And then finally, I outlined just sort of what that bond package might look like and some of the things that have changed since my memo in March for the first council work session. And Stephen and Kate did inform me this morning that because of this whole supply chain experience that we're having in the United States, materials and inflation that we know are affecting all areas of the economy, that they are increasing the project budget, and that the city is very graciously, and we are appreciative that absorbing some of that cost, so that they're now estimating Play Plaza at 61 million, of which the city would then fund 41, and the Conservancy is, making their commitment of 20. And I had some ideas on how we, potentially rejigger what we had presented in the spring. I will send this to you separately. I know this is not really a visual presentation, but that concludes my memo.
So I have a question, Janet, about the Brown building. My understanding is that there was the study that was being done to look at potential home for marbles, and the Brown building was part of that study. Yeah. Are we kind of prejudicing that study by already saying this is what we're going to use this for, as opposed to letting the study happen and then making that determination? I have some concerns about that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mayor. I'm going to let Kate, since she's managing that study, speak to that.
Yeah, we're not programming the Brown building for anything specific. The Marbles feasibility study is going to look at test fits across the site, including the buildings adjacent to Play Plaza. So Broughton Clark Brown and the ones on the other side. So we are going to let that study unfold and let it guide decision-making there.
Okay, thank you. Jen?
I just had a quick question. Janet, do you have any idea of how many more staff you need exactly? I mean, it's sort of like we need more for this and that and the other thing, but is there any idea of a target to be aiming for?
Once again, I'm gonna turn to Kate, since I think she's working on some very specific models. I named sort of the high level buckets, but
yeah.
As part of the Play Plaza project, we are developing a management and operations plan, which we're reviewing internally, that will help develop the staff counts. We've been working across our divisions within the department, from horticulture to maintenance to facilities, to look at various staffing plans. And that's something that, from staffing for planning, programming, and facilities and operations, that we'll continue to work on that plan. But we have initial thoughts and counts, and it's just about looking at those again and refining them. Because that is part of the discussion with the bond, is what are the operations needed to support these improvements across the system. So
yeah, and that's part of why I ask, of course, is because I know of some specific needs elsewhere. And it'd be nice to be able to ask for it all at one time and try to kind of get it all in there at once if we can.
Yep. Yeah, Jen, we're working on projects we know, or I know the bond has not been, edged in stone, but we know Chavis is a high priority. So we're looking at aquatic counts for the aquatic center, and Method and Tarboro, all the projects that we feel like are that the council has expressed priority in. Helene and our finance staff are all pulling together. So it's, it's like versus like, and that will be included in the proposed tax increase.
Great. And some of that, of course, goes across all the parks, like the invasive species removal program that we talked about at the last board meeting. Great.
One thing, Jen, is that with Dix, Falling for Local, we had 20,000 people, right? 4th of July, we're going to have close to 75 to 100,000. The types of things we're hosting at the park are unique in the system. And so really thinking thoughtfully about how we staff that is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Janet said, it's more intense. Yeah. Thanks.
So Janet, I think that's a great list. You got everything on 2 pieces of paper. That's terrific. Except only thing I would suggest is you change the number by Lake Wheeler Road. The number 1.
Yeah. I'm
afraid we're going to get behind. You know, we won't have the time to get it done. So I would, only suggestion is make that number 1. That's a great.
Right. Janet, it's 10 past 10.
Yep.
And I have a meeting at 10:15 that I have to get ready for. So if there's any other discussion around the table, anybody have anything else they'd like to bring up?
I just have one more thing, and I apologize. I was late to the last meeting, so I may have missed this. Regarding all of the organizations that submitted letters of interest, do we have any homework for that? Should we be reviewing those and providing feedback, or what's the next step?
For your information, and will be evaluated in this upcoming building process. So there was a request to see who had submitted a letter of interest. And that will be part of this next phase of work with the Development Finance Initiative and the team that we hire. So that was just more for your information. And as this next process unfolds, we'll bring you into that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
And you might have noticed in the chat, Alicia has put up a just a reminder about NC State beginning their new fiscal master planning process. There's a link there where you can go get more information. Alicia, do you want to add anything to that?
It was briefly mentioned earlier. Just wanted to drop the link for anyone that is interested in participating. It does include Centennial East, but also all of NC State's land throughout Raleigh. So I think some of the city staff have also received that, but please feel free to share it with anyone that you think is interested in participating.
Thank you.
I sent it to Janet Mayer so she could send it to the Conservancy board. The only other thing, last year, we missed the opportunity to talk about fees with this group. So in your next couple of meetings, we're going to talk about programming fees, rental fees, and special event fees, and right sizing them to Kate talking about. We're hosting some of the largest events on the East Coast and what's appropriate for us to recoup some of those costs. So we'll bring some information for you in the next few meetings to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I believe there was one more public comment. I don't know if that person's still on.
Orange, I was unable to get him in today. He said he's going to report back at a subsequent meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, thank you, everyone. The meeting is now adjourned, and we will see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.